Hey, and welcome to another 31 Days of Horror 2015 segment, Toronto After Dark Edition. That's right. Today, I'm going to talk about a film that unfortunately doesn't count towards my 31 Days of Horror. Now, some people might say it would, but I honestly, I don't think it does. So, because I don't think it does, even though, you know, IMDb puts this in at horror, I'm gonna say it would be barely horror. Barely horror. I didn't find it horrific whatsoever. I think it felt more like maybe an action thriller than a horror film, even though I do know that there are horror elements that the filmmakers were going for, and that is the 2015 film The Demolisher. Now, I'm gonna come out and say this and be upfront. I know people who worked on this film, you know, producers and such, so I don't want, you know, my opinions and such to seem like they're biased or anything like that. So I want to be upfront and let you know that I do know the people behind who worked on this film. Now, it is a film directed by Gabriel, I think it's Carer, who did the films If a Tree Falls and In the House of Flies, both of which I have, but I haven't watched yet. Oddly enough, I should probably do that, right? But he's a relatively new director. Within the last 5 years, I think, is essentially when he really jumped on the scene. And this film is about essentially a repairman named Bruce, played by the actor Rye Barrett, who has been in terms of, he hasn't been acting for very long but he's really made himself known. Well, sort of known but unknown. He was in If a Tree Falls and Kill, basically all of Gabriel's movie, and The House of Flies as well. He also had a little part in Exit Humanity. He was in Sick, Antisocial, The Drownsman, Ejecta, and he's continuing. Like he just keeps where I think he usually works on like at least, I don't know, a number of films every year. I honestly, every time I see him post something else on Facebook, it's like, oh, just wrap this film, moving on to this one. You know, oh, this weekend I'm going to shoot this, or going to be in this thing, blah, blah, blah. So he's a very, very active actor. Yes, it is in low-budget Canadian horror films, but you know what? It's all good. He also did the stunt and fight choreography for this film, so he wasn't just an actor. But yeah, it's about him, his character, who takes it upon himself the responsibility of taking care of his disabled wife, Samantha, who is played by Tiana Nori, who I think people are seeing it now. The film Bite, and from last year, if you managed to see it, another Canadian film done by, you know, people I'm friends with as well, Clean Break. I don't think, you know, I still haven't seen that movie. Sorry, Trisha, I haven't seen that film yet. My bad. But yeah, so she was in that film as well. So again, not a lot, but you know, she's been again in that low-budget Canadian horror scene. And like I said, she plays his disabled wife Samantha, who was a police woman who got, I guess she was on a case or something like that, and she was dealing with some gang related stuff, and the gangs came back and essentially left her disabled, in a, I guess, wheelchair bound, essentially. And so Bruce essentially takes it upon himself to become this vigilante character, the Demolisher, and go after this gang. And that's sort of like the first half of the film. And then the second half of the film sort of has him chasing some young woman, Marie, played by Jessica Vano, and essentially in her first role, because of really an unknown real reason for it. But it, yeah, it's a good second half of the film, is this, you know, chase section. And I guess most people would categorize this portion of it to be the horror aspects of it, as the director did state that he was trying to sort of do this, you know, Michael Myers type slasher where, you know, the person's always trying to get away and they're going after them, but at the same time they wanted to create, you know, a Michael Myers character that was human, so he could be hurt. So not really a Michael Myers character. And you know what? I will come off and say that despite knowing all these people involved in this film, I was not a fan of the Demolisher for several reasons, and I will go over the reasons why I didn't like the film in general first, and then I'll tell you about some of the stuff I did like about the film. One of the things I didn't like about it was the fact that this film seemed very... the direction really didn't make much sense. It seemed like two separate storylines, and the first storyline was never resolved, and the second storyline seemed to come out of nowhere and made no real sense. The director did state a lot of the times that, you know, they had these ideas and they just sort of morphed into the film over time, that they were, you know, when they were building it, and you know, they had this story and then they wanted to add this in, and then, oh, they thought of a good idea and they threw that in, and, you know, it just built up on top of each other until eventually you had this finished product. He also mentioned that he allowed the actors and such to have a lot of freedom in terms of what they were doing. And honestly, all of this combined seems to be the reason why I didn't really like it. The film really didn't seem like it had a clear-cut story that it was trying to tell. If you've seen it and you're, you know, in the same boat as I was when I first watched it, you have to think of it this way. They were trying to tell a story of, you know, wife gets hurt, husband who's a repairman decides to, for some reason, he's gonna don on this SWAT uniform and become a vigilante, however you want to say it, and he goes after the gang, but that never really resolves. And between the, you know, going after the gang and all the stress that puts on him, plus the stress at home, eventually, you know, up top he's not doing so well, and his mental state degrades and disintegrates to the point where he just directs his rage at this woman, and for like the most minute reasons, and he fixates on her and goes after her until you get to the end. And honestly, I think that's where it really is. It's too much for the film to really, for any film. Honestly, it's separate stories. They're trying to tell too many different stories instead of just sticking to the one. And it just been, wife gets beaten, disabled, go through that, do some build up of their relationship and their characters, and then he decides he's going to go out and take it upon himself to get this revenge, and then he goes after the gang, and he manages or doesn't manage to actually get that revenge for whatever. That should have been one story, should have been it. Save the secondary story for, you know, a sequel, if you will. Because yeah, it didn't work for me. The transition didn't work. It just seemed like it was too much in too short of a time. Another thing I didn't like, despite the fact that I really like him as a person and I've liked him in other roles, I did not like Rye Barrett in this role. I didn't like his acting. I didn't like, you know, when he wasn't the Demolisher, I didn't like the way he portrayed the Demolisher. You know, Kane Hodder made Michael, you know, made his character, you know, Jason, seem menacing, like he's a big guy. Rye is a big guy. I don't think he's Kane Hodder big, but he's big. And yet, when you see him sometimes in some scenes, he comes off as too human. And yes, like I said, they were trying to go for that, but that diminishes him as being this menacing character. And like I said, the horror aspect really isn't there because he doesn't come off as being this menacing character, short of the fact that he's continually going and he doesn't really let up. How he knows how to fight, the way he does, is not really. I don't get it. If he's a repairman, why does he know how to do these things that he's doing? Yeah, I think making him a human, you know, giving him those human characteristics rather than the monster characteristics, again, maybe not the best choice. I understand what they were trying to do. I understand why they would try to do it. I just don't think it was the right decision to make. At least not in this film, not in the way they were, you know, in terms of the story they were trying to put forth, or should have put forth. So that being said, those are really the reasons why I didn't care much for it. I thought, you know, Tiana and Jessica, both the way they portrayed their roles, the way they were on screen, no problems. I liked what they did. It was just Rye. There were moments in it where I was just like, that I didn't like it. I did not like it. But in terms of what I did like, there is quite a bit. The cinematography in this film is quite good. There are some scenes that are like, they're money. They are like really nice art in terms of, you know, a low budget action figure. You're like, wow, okay, wow, they pulled that off. Two would be the actual fight sequences. You know what, I've got to ask Rye, because I don't remember him having, you know, being a stuntman or all of this kind of stuff. Maybe, you know, outside of some people take, you know, the fighting for stage or fighting in movies and all that kind of stuff, and they do some training in that. I get people who take that and they do it, but most of them don't go on to then choreograph fight sequences. But he does here, and you know what? They're good. They're actually quite good. I was surprised by just how good they were. So yeah, that was, like I said, surprising. Very, very surprising. Then to find out that Rye was the one who put them all together, you know, blew me away. I did not realize that. The other thing is the sound. The music in this film and the sounds and such that were used, they range. Music I really, really liked. Sound, Sometimes. I'll say that the sound design was a little meh, but I should have put that in the other category, right? But the music and such and the way it was used in the film worked for me. The character design on the Demolisher, I liked it. Honestly, it had this look of, rather than a superhero or a monster, it really had this, you know, today's vigilante costume. Something that somebody would actually put together if they were going out to cause somebody harm, and they, you know, they weren't superheroes, you know. So yeah, I really liked the decision to go with what he was wearing. Yeah, essentially that's it. I liked the look of the Demolisher, is essentially what I'm saying, but I didn't like the story. I did not, and even the way that the story was told, I didn't buy into it. And I found myself, like a lot of people I talked to, were a little confused. Yeah, I think confused would be the word I'd use, because a lot of them were asking, you know, they were asking questions, and not the kind of philosophical questions of, oh, why would he do that? Oh, why is this? Oh, why, you know, what does this represent? No, it was more of along to the, when did that happen? Or, wait, when did the character switch? Why would he go this way? I didn't get why. And it was it was frustration on behalf of the viewer with just not being able to follow the logic of the film. And in the end, I think that's where the Demolisher falls apart. It's in the logic of the film. It plays itself as a pretty straightforward type of, you know, action thriller, with sort of horror elements, though they, like I said, they don't come across as horror in my mind, so I didn't include it. And so, that being the case, yeah, if you start going that art house type of symbolism and metaphor and all that kind of stuff in your film, it can really bog it down and start making it seem a little off kilter. And I think that's what happened with the Demolisher. It just didn't flow properly. It wasn't told well enough for viewers to really bite into it. That being said, I do know people who really like the Demolisher. I know some who like loved it, but I wasn't one of them. So I will not be recommending the Demolisher, despite, you know, anybody I knew who was involved with it. Sorry guys, I can't. If you're watching this, I just can't bring myself to do it. Yeah, I got a reputation to uphold. Yeah, my rap, eh? Anyways, yeah, so that is the Demolisher, and that is the end of this review. So stay tuned, there's still more 31 Days of Horror and more Toronto After Dark Film Festival coverage to come. Till next time, take care, and have a good one.